The poison was ready, but Ibrahim Traoré turned the tables before it touched his lips. The crystal glasses clinked softly against one another as servants in white gloves arranged them with practiced precision. Ibrahim Traoré observed the opulence of the government palace dining hall, a stark contrast to the military barracks where he had spent most of his career. The chandelier light caught in the ruby-colored wine being poured for foreign dignitaries who smiled too widely, their eyes never warming. At 34, the youngest president in Africa sat quietly at the head of the mahogany table. His simple, military uniform a jarring contrast to the expensive suits surrounding him. Ibrahim's calloused fingers drummed once against the tablecloth as he noted the French ambassador whispering to his aide, their glances in his direction barely concealed. When the head server approached with a specially prepared drink, deeper in color than the others, with a subtle sheen across its surface, Ibrahim's gaze sharpened. He didn't reach for it immediately, instead watching the reflection of a shadow passing behind him on the liquid surface. His expression revealed nothing, but his mind calculated everything. He had survived battlefield ambushes before. This diplomatic dinner might look different, but Ibrahim recognized an ambush when he saw one. Before we continue, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Ibrahim's mind traveled back to that sweltering September day 8 months ago when he had removed his predecessor in a coup that stunned the nation. The international headlines had painted him as just another military strongman, but none had bothered to uncover why the army captain had stepped forward. None had reported on the secret deals his predecessor had signed, giving foreign mining companies unhindered access to Burkina Faso's gold and uranium reserves for pennies while the people starved. Mr. President, the French ambassador lifted his glass now, to continued cooperation between our nations. The word cooperation hung in the air like a sword. Ibrahim had cancelled 3 exploitative mining contracts last month. The ambassador's smile didn't reach his eyes. To true partnership, Ibrahim countered quietly, lifting his glass without drinking. The distinction was subtle but unmistakable. Several diplomats shifted uncomfortably. 3 hours earlier, an unmarked envelope had been slipped under his office door. Inside, a single handwritten note. They will try tonight. Trust no one's hand but your own. The handwriting belonged to someone within his inner circle, but the signature was deliberately absent. Ibrahim had spent his first months in office mapping the intricate web of foreign interests that had entangled his country for decades. Gold, uranium, military bases. Burkina Faso had been treated as a resource bank, not a sovereign nation. When he began redirecting mining profits into public infrastructure and healthcare, threatening calls from Paris, Washington, and Beijing followed within hours. Captain, forgive me, President Traoré. The Belgian mining executive seated to his left interrupted his thoughts, emphasizing his military rank as if to diminish his current position. You've been unusually quiet about your plans for the Bulsa mines. Our board is quite anxious to finalize arrangements. Ibrahim studied the man's manicured nails, diamond cufflinks, and the casual way he rested his elbow on the table. The physical embodiment of entitlement. Behind him stood Ibrahim's aide, Issouf, who caught his eye briefly. A subtle nod confirmed that security protocols had been activated throughout the palace. Patience is a virtue my grandmother taught me, Ibrahim replied, voice soft but firm. She sold mangoes at the market for 40 years. She told me the fastest way to starve is to sell your harvest too cheaply. The Belgian's smile froze, his knuckles whitening around his glass. The metaphor was not lost on anyone present. The server approached again, this time with a special bottle. Your favorite cognac, Mr. President, reserved only for you. The man's hands trembled slightly as he poured. the amber liquid catching the light. Ibrahim recognized him as a new addition to the palace staff, hired just last week on the recommendation of his Minister of Interior Affairs, the same minister who had been making frequent late-night calls to a number in Paris. "How thoughtful," Ibrahim said, letting his fingers brush against the glass without lifting it. "But tonight, I believe I'll stick with water. Perhaps you'd like to serve this special drink to Minister Ouedraogo instead? He has been working so hard lately." Across the table, the Interior Minister's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of panic so brief most would have missed it. Ibrahim hadn't survived childhood poverty, military academy, and 2 coups by missing such details. He had come to this dinner knowing exactly what awaited him. The question now was not if there would be an attempt on his life, but how many at this table were complicit in it. The dinner progressed with the precision of a choreographed dance, each course arriving with impeccable timing. Ibrahim ate sparingly, selecting from the same platters served to others. The palace chef, a stern woman from his home village who had cooked for him since childhood, watched from the kitchen doorway with crossed arms. Her presence was both comfort and strategy. No food left her kitchen without her knowledge. "You've made some concerning friends lately, Mr. President," the American diplomat remarked casually between bites of grilled fish. "Moscow, Beijing, not the alliances your predecessors typically pursued." Ibrahim set down his fork without a sound. "I've found that friendship should be earned, not assumed. Burkina Faso welcomes partnerships that respect our sovereignty." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Several diplomats exchanged glances. "Sovereignty is certainly important," the French ambassador interjected, swirling his wine, "but so is stability. Your recent military purchases from Russia have raised concerns about regional balance." What he meant was that Ibrahim had refused to be dependent solely on French military support, with its many strings attached. For decades, former colonial powers had maintained influence through economic dependency disguised as aid. "Balance," Ibrahim echoed, allowing a slight edge to enter his voice. "An interesting concept from nations that have kept their boots on our necks for generations." An uncomfortable silence descended. The Interior Minister cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we can speak more diplomatically," he suggested, a thin sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. "Our international friends have Burkina Faso's best interests at heart." Ibrahim studied his minister, noting how his left hand trembled slightly, the same hand that had accepted envelopes from foreign mining executives in secret meetings Ibrahim had documented meticulously. The same trembling hand that had signed transfer orders moving millions in mining royalties to offshore accounts. "I wonder," Ibrahim mused, "what exactly those interests might be." He gestured toward the palace walls. "The gold beneath our soil, the uranium in our mountains, or perhaps the strategic location of our nation?" The British diplomat cleared her throat. "President Traoré, you must understand that global markets require certainty. Your recent policy shifts have made investors nervous. And nervous investors make for nervous governments." Ibrahim completed her thought. "But tell me, what makes the Burkinabe people more nervous? Economic uncertainty or watching their national wealth disappear while they remain in poverty?" Outside the dining room windows, Ibrahim could see his presidential guard positioned strategically throughout the gardens. Captain Zungrana, his most trusted officer, stood with shoulders squared, hand resting on his sidearm. Their eyes met. Briefly, a confirmation that everything was in place. For weeks, Ibrahim had been carefully feeding misinformation to suspected leaks within his government. Different false plans to different officials, waiting to see which version would return to him through intelligence channels. Now he knew precisely who had betrayed him and to whom. The dinner service continued, a parade of elaborate dishes that few ordinary citizens of Burkina Faso would ever taste. Ibrahim watched the foreign officials eat heartily while speaking. Of austerity, measures his country should implement. The irony wasn't lost on him. Your predecessor understood the importance of continuity, the French ambassador remarked between sips of wine. Policy consistency attracts investment. My predecessor is currently enjoying the hospitality of a Moroccan prison for embezzlement, Ibrahim replied evenly. Perhaps consistency isn't always a virtue. The ambassador's smile tightened. A temporary situation, I'm sure. Political fortunes change rapidly in this region. The threat was thinly veiled. Ibrahim had heard rumors of former colonial powers orchestrating coups when African leaders stepped out of line. 14 African presidents had been assassinated since independence, most after challenging foreign economic interests. They do indeed, Ibrahim agreed, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. Which is why I've taken the liberty of recording this entire dinner, for posterity's sake. A moment of shocked silence followed. The interior minister's water glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You seem unwell, Minister, Ibrahim observed. Perhaps the pressure of your position is becoming too much. Or perhaps it's the strain of managing so many international banking accounts simultaneously. The color drained from the minister's face. I don't know what you mean, Mr. President. No? Then you wouldn't mind explaining the 6 million euros transferred from your Geneva account to Paris last week. Money that bears a striking resemblance to missing mining royalties? The room fell silent. Even the servers froze in place. These are baseless accusations, the minister stammered, looking desperately toward the French ambassador. I've served this country faithfully. You've served someone faithfully, Ibrahim corrected, though I question which country's interests have benefited. Ibrahim turned his attention back to his untouched special glass. I find myself curious about this particular cognac. You said it was reserved especially for me, the server shifted uncomfortably. Yes, Mr. President, the finest quality. Then you wouldn't mind if we had it tested? Captain Zungrana has an excellent laboratory at his disposal. The server's eyes darted toward the interior minister, who imperceptibly shook his head. Is something wrong? Ibrahim asked, his voice deceptively gentle. No, Mr. President, the server managed, but his hands were visibly shaking now. Ibrahim leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. In my village, there is an old saying, the snake that hides in your courtyard will eventually bite your children. I have no children yet, but Burkina Faso, all 30 million of her people, they are my family now. He stood slowly, his simple military uniform a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. And I will not allow them to be bitten by snakes hiding in borrowed finery. The interior minister suddenly pushed back from the table. This is outrageous. I won't sit here and... Sit down. Ibrahim's command carried the weight of battlefield authority. The room froze. You'll sit exactly where you are, until I determine what's in this glass and who ordered it prepared. From the doorway, Captain Zungrana stepped forward with 4 armed guards. The diplomatic immunity that protected foreign officials wouldn't extend to attempted assassination. Mr. President, the French ambassador began, his diplomatic training evident in his measured tone. Whatever misunderstanding has occurred, I'm certain we can resolve this without... There is no misunderstanding, Ibrahim interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Only clarity emerging from darkness. Like most poisons, this one works best when the victim remains unaware. He nodded to Captain Zungrana, who produced a small electronic device from his pocket. With your permission, sir? Ibrahim gestured toward his untouched glass. The captain carefully inserted a thin probe into the liquid. After a moment, numbers flashed across the small screen. The captain's expression hardened. Thallium, sir. Fatal. Dose. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The server dropped his tray with a crash and lunged for the door, only to be intercepted by guards. Thallium, Ibrahim repeated thoughtfully. Colorless, odorless, tasteless. Death appears to be from natural causes. Heart failure, typically, a sophisticated choice, not the work of an amateur. He turned his gaze to the interior minister, who had gone completely still. Not the work of a single minister acting alone. I think, the French ambassador stood abruptly, this is absurd theater. As a diplomatic representative, I demand you demand nothing in my country. Ibrahim cut him off. Not anymore. The diplomat's face flushed red. The international community will not stand for this treatment of the international community. Ibrahim's laugh held no humor. The same community that has watched silently as our resources were plundered. The same community that calls us corrupt while your corporations bribe our officials. That international community, he gestured toward the waiting guards. Captain, please escort our distinguished guests to the secure conference room. I believe we have much to discuss about the future of foreign interests in Burkina Faso. As the stunned diplomats were led from the room, Ibrahim turned to his trembling interior minister. As for you, old friend, we have even more to discuss. About loyalty, betrayal, and the price of both. The minister's shoulders slumped in defeat. They promised me protection. They said you were too idealistic to survive in this world. Ibrahim studied the man he had once trusted. And what world is that? One where African leaders must choose between foreign masters or death? That world is ending, Minister. Tonight. Through the windows, Ibrahim could see military vehicles rolling through the palace gates, loyal troops securing the perimeter. Across the capital, similar operations would be underway, arresting conspirators identified through weeks of careful intelligence work. The poisoned glass still sat on the table, its contents now confirmed lethal. Ibrahim gazed at it thoughtfully, a physical manifestation of centuries of exploitation and attempted control. Bring me the palace staff, he commanded. As the kitchen workers and servers were gathered, fear evident in their expressions, Ibrahim addressed them directly. Tonight, an attempt was made not just on my life, but on the sovereignty of our nation. I do not blame those who carried orders. I seek those who gave them. He pointed to the glass. This poison was meant to silence one voice. Instead, it will awaken millions. The palace conference room had been transformed into an impromptu tribunal. At one end sat Ibrahim, flanked by Captain Zungrana and his chief of intelligence. At the other end, the foreign diplomats and the interior minister sat in uncomfortable silence. Between them, on a small table, rested the poisoned glass. Now, sealed in clear evidence plastic, a silent accusation. Gentlemen and lady, Ibrahim began, his voice measured and calm. In the past 3 hours, we have arrested 17 individuals connected to this assassination attempt. Their testimony has been illuminating. He slid forward several folders containing transcripts and photographs. The French ambassador didn't reach for them. This is a flagrant violation of diplomatic protocol, the ambassador said, though his voice lacked conviction. You cannot detain diplomatic personnel. I haven't detained diplomats, Ibrahim clarified. I've invited you to witness the evidence of conspiracy against a sovereign state, a courtesy, before the international press conference scheduled for 1 hour from now. A ripple of alarm passed through the assembled officials. The British diplomat leaned forward. Surely we can discuss this reasonably, away from media sensationalism. Ibrahim's expression didn't change. For decades, reasonable discussions have occurred behind closed doors. The result has been the continued exploitation of African resources and the removal of leaders who challenge that system. Tonight, we bring everything into the light. On cue, his chief of intelligence activated a large screen on the wall. It displayed banking records, phone transcripts, and surveillance photos, a meticulously assembled puzzle of betrayal. 6 months ago, I began feeding different pieces of misinformation to suspected intelligence assets within my government. Ibrahim explained, each piece was unique, traceable. When those pieces returned to us through intercepted communications, we identified the network. Minister Ouedraogo was merely one component. The Interior Minister stared at the floor, shoulders slumped in defeat. "What exactly do you want?" the American diplomat asked, his practiced calm beginning to crack. "A renegotiation," Ibrahim replied simply, "of everything." He rose and walked slowly around the table, a physical embodiment of the power shift occurring. New mining contracts with fair profit sharing, immediate cessation of covert operations within our borders, public acknowledgement of past interference, and reparations for resources extracted under exploitative terms. The French ambassador scoffed. Impossible demands. No government would agree to such terms. Then perhaps those governments should consider the consequences of having their methods exposed, Ibrahim countered, gesturing to the evidence displayed on the screen. Or perhaps they'd prefer to explain to the world why their diplomats participated in an assassination attempt against an elected head of state. "You have no proof of direct involvement," the French ambassador snapped, finally losing his composure. Ibrahim smiled thinly. "The beautiful thing about poison plots is that they leave digital fingerprints. The thallium compound used tonight was manufactured in Lyon. It was signed out of a laboratory by a security operative working from your embassy. We have the transfer documentation." He tapped a folder containing chemical analysis reports. "Modern forensics is remarkable, isn't it? Almost as remarkable as the banking system that transferred €2 million to Minister Ouedraogo's account 3 days ago, from a shell company owned by your military intelligence service." Complete silence fell over the room. The evidence was damning, meticulous, and impossible to dismiss. "Captain," Ibrahim said quietly, "please bring in our other guest." The door opened, and guards escorted a middle-aged European man in an expensive suit, handcuffed and looking considerably less composed than when Ibrahim had last seen him. "Monsieur Descamps," Ibrahim acknowledged, the head of the largest French mining corporation operating in Burkina Faso. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice." "This is outrageous," the executive sputtered. "I demand legal representation and immediate contact with my embassy." "The same embassy that coordinated your midnight meetings with my interior minister?" Ibrahim asked mildly. "The same embassy that helped you draft the assassination directive after I cancelled your mining permits." The executive blanched. The French ambassador stared daggers at him, a silent command to remain quiet. "Too late for silence," Ibrahim noted. "Monsieur Descamps has already provided a detailed statement about your government's involvement in previous political transitions in Burkina Faso, including the deaths of 2 of my predecessors who questioned mining arrangements." Ibrahim returned to his seat, calm and centered, despite the explosive tension surrounding him. For centuries, Africa has been treated as a resource to be harvested, not a continent of nations with the right to self-determination. Tonight, that changes, beginning with Burkina Faso. He lifted the evidence bag containing the poisoned drink. "This glass contains enough thallium to kill 3 men. It represents your view of Africa's leadership, disposable when inconvenient. But it also represents your greatest miscalculation." Ibrahim set the glass down, directly in front of the French ambassador. "You believed that removing 1 man would change the course of a nation, that eliminating me would restore your access to our gold, our uranium, our strategic position. But Burkina Faso is no longer a collection of resources for you to exploit. It is 30 million people who have awoken to their true potential." Outside the window, Ibrahim could see lights spreading throughout the capital as news of the thwarted assassination attempt spread. Citizens were gathering in the main square, their voices carrying faintly through the night air. "Captain," Ibrahim said, "please inform the press that we're ready for them." "Wait," the British diplomat interjected hurriedly. "Perhaps we've been too hasty. A negotiation requires good faith on both sides. What assurances can you offer regarding existing investments?" Ibrahim's expression hardened. "You speak of good faith while sitting beside the architects of my planned murder. Interesting diplomatic position." He stood again, this time with finality. "Here are my terms. By morning, I want formal statements from each of your governments acknowledging awareness of this plot. Within 7 days, I want new draft agreements on my desk that reflect fair market value for our resources. Within 30 days, I want all covert intelligence assets withdrawn from Burkina Faso." "And if we refuse?" the French ambassador asked. Though his tone suggested he already knew the answer, Ibrahim picked up the evidence bag containing the poisoned glass. "Then the full evidence of tonight's attempt and all previous interventions will be presented to the United Nations Security Council, the International Criminal Court, and every major media outlet worldwide. Your governments will face sanctions, your corporations will face boycotts, and your diplomats will become international pariahs." He set the glass down again with deliberate care. "Or we can move forward together with genuine respect and partnership. The choice is yours, but the days of colonialism by other means are over." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled. Decades of unequal power dynamics had shifted in a single evening. "This is blackmail," the American diplomat finally said, though without conviction. "No," Ibrahim corrected him. "This is sovereignty." The door opened as palace guards escorted journalists from international news agencies. Camera lights illuminated the room, capturing the unthinkable. Western diplomats and corporate executives caught in a failed assassination plot against an African president. Ibrahim addressed the cameras directly, his voice steady and clear. "Tonight, an attempt was made to silence Burkina Faso's call for true independence. That attempt has failed, and in its failure, a new chapter begins. Not just for my country, but for all nations still fighting for the right to determine their own destinies." The Interior Minister, watching his former conspirators squirm under the camera lights, finally spoke. "They promised me power, wealth, protection. They said no African leader could stand against them and survive." Ibrahim regarded him without hatred. "They were wrong, and tonight the world will see just how wrong they have been for generations." As cameras flashed and journalists shouted questions, Ibrahim remained calm at the center of the storm he had created. The poisoned glass, now a symbol rather than a weapon, sat illuminated under the harsh lights, a turning point made visible for all to witness. Dawn broke over Ouagadougou as if the sun itself was responding to the night's revelations. Streets that would normally be quiet at this early hour buzzed with activity as citizens gathered around televisions and radios, sharing news of what was already being called the poison diplomacy. Images of Western officials caught in their own conspiracy had spread across social media with unprecedented speed. Ibrahim stood at his office window, watching the capital awaken to a new reality. He hadn't slept, overseeing the secure detention of those implicated and coordinating with loyal military units to maintain order. His simple desk was covered with international press clippings, diplomatic cables, and intelligence reports. "The French government has issued their statement, sir," Captain Zungrana reported, entering with a tablet. "They're claiming the ambassador was acting without authorization. They've recalled him effectively immediately." Ibrahim nodded, unsurprised by the distancing strategy. "And the others?" Similar responses. Denial of highest-level involvement, promises of investigation, calls for diplomatic resolution. The captain's expression conveyed his skepticism. "They're in damage control mode." As expected, Ibrahim scrolled through the international headlines on the tablet. Global reaction was divided along predictable lines, Western media questioning the evidence while emphasizing the constitutional concerns around his government. African and Asian outlets celebrating what many were calling a watershed moment in post-colonial relations. "What about the corporations?" Ibrahim asked. "Their stock prices are in freefall. Deskamp's mining company has lost 30% of its value since trading opened." Captain Zungrana allowed himself a small smile. "Investors are panicking about their access to our resources." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Issouf, Ibrahim's aide, who had helped coordinate the night security operation, entered with a young woman Ibrahim recognized as a junior staffer from the Ministry of Communications. "Mr. President," Issouf said, "Ajaratu has something important you should hear." The young woman stepped forward nervously, clutching a file folder. "Sir, I'm the one who sent the warning note." Ibrahim studied her carefully. She couldn't be older than 25, with intelligent eyes that betrayed no hint of deception. "Explain," he said simply. "I was assigned to translate documents." "For Minister Wedraogo," she began. 3 days ago, I was filing papers in his office when I saw communications about a special arrangement for last night's dinner. The documents mentioned ensuring you wouldn't leave the dinner alive." Her voice faltered momentarily before continuing. "I couldn't go to anyone within the ministry. I didn't know who else was involved." Ibrahim gestured for her to sit. "Why risk yourself for me? We've never even spoken." Ajaratu straightened her shoulders. "My father was a miner in Bulsa. He died from unsafe conditions while extracting gold that made foreign companies wealthy. When you cancelled those mining contracts last month and demanded better terms, I realized you were fighting for people like my father." Her eyes met his directly. "I couldn't let them kill that hope." The simple truth of her words resonated more deeply than any political ideology. In the end, governance was about people, their struggles, their hopes, their dignity. "Thank you," Ibrahim said quietly. "Your courage saved more than my life last night." He turned to Captain Zungrana. "Ensure Ajaratu receives appropriate security protection and create a position for her on our communications team. We need people of integrity as we move forward." Outside the window, Ibrahim could see crowds gathering in the main square, many carrying hastily made signs celebrating the thwarted assassination. National flags waved alongside hand-painted banners declaring African resources for African people and no more poisoned politics. His phone rang, another international call, the 5th in the past hour. Leaders from neighboring countries were reaching out, some with congratulations, others with concerned questions about how Western powers might retaliate. Regional stability hung in delicate balance. "Mr. President," Issouf said hesitantly, "the Interior Minister is asking to speak with you." Ibrahim considered for a moment. "Bring him." When the disgraced minister was escorted in, the change in his demeanor was striking. Gone was the arrogance of power, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of a man facing his own failures. "You could have had me executed last night," the minister said without preamble. "Many would say it would be justified." "Death is easy," Ibrahim replied. "Responsibility is harder. You will stand trial for treason, openly and fairly. The Burkinabe people deserve to see justice done properly." The minister's shoulders slumped further. They offered so much: power, protection, wealth beyond imagination. They convinced me you were naive, that you would be removed one way or another, and that I was simply choosing the winning side. And now? Now I understand what they truly feared about you. The minister's eyes held a glimmer of something like respect. "You can't be bought because you believe in something greater than yourself." Ibrahim considered these words as guards led the minister away. Was it truly so simple? Had decades of colonial exploitation continued because too many leaders had chosen personal enrichment over national sovereignty? His contemplation was interrupted by Captain Zongrana, returning with a secure satellite phone. "Sir, it's the Chinese. Ambassador. Their government is offering immediate investment to replace the Western contracts with what they call more favorable terms." Ibrahim took the phone but didn't immediately speak. One form of exploitation could easily be replaced by another. True independence would require careful navigation between competing global interests. "Tell him I appreciate the call and will discuss possibilities after our government has completed its review of all international agreements," he finally instructed, handing back the phone. "We will not rush from one master to another." As morning fully broke over the capital, Ibrahim made his way to the palace balcony where a crowd had gathered. Citizens from all walks of life, students, market women, laborers, civil servants, stood together, united in a moment of national awakening. He stepped to the microphone, the early sunlight catching on his simple uniform. "My fellow Burkinabe," he began, his voice carrying across the square. "Last night we witnessed the dying gasp of an old system, a system that viewed African nations as resources to be exploited rather than people to be respected." The crowd roared its approval, flags waving more vigorously. But today marks not just defiance of the past, but the beginning of a new future. He gripped the railing, leaning forward with genuine emotion. "A future where Burkina Faso's resources benefit Burkina Faso's people, where international relationships are based on mutual respect, not coercion and threats." In the crowd, Ibrahim could see faces transformed by possibility, the same hungry hope he had felt as a young officer, dreaming of a country truly free from foreign control. "The path ahead will not be easy," he cautioned. "Those who have profited from our exploitation will not surrender their privileges willingly. We may face economic pressure, political isolation, even further attempts to undermine our sovereignty." The crowd grew quieter, absorbing the reality of the challenges ahead. "But we will face these challenges together, standing upright as dignified people, because true independence, true sovereignty is worth any price." As the cheers erupted again, Ibrahim felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Thwarting an assassination was momentary. Building a truly independent nation would be the work of generations. But for the first time in Burkina Faso's history, that work would proceed on terms set by its own people. The poisoned glass that had been meant to end a presidency had instead catalyzed a national rebirth. In diplomatic circles around the world, urgent meetings were being convened to discuss the Burkina Faso situation. But here, in this square, among these people, there was no situation to manage, only a future to build. 3 months later, Ibrahim stood in the transformed palace dining room, the same space where foreign diplomats had once plotted his death. The ornate colonial furnishings had been replaced with locally crafted wooden tables, arranged in a circle rather than a hierarchy. The walls, once adorned with European paintings, now showcased works by Burkinabe artists celebrating the country's struggle for true independence. Representatives from 27 African nations sat around the table, their faces reflecting both caution and hope. What had begun as a thwarted assassination had catalyzed a continental conversation about resource sovereignty and neo-colonial influence. "The Ouagadougou Principles," the Kenyan delegate was saying, tapping the document before him, "represent the most comprehensive framework for resource nationalism we've seen since independence. But implementation will face significant resistance." Ibrahim nodded, acknowledging the challenge. "Which is precisely why we must present a united position. Divided, they can isolate and pressure us individually. United, We negotiate from strength. The VD Nigerian representative, a veteran diplomat, leaned forward. The Western powers are already calling this economic suicide. They claim foreign investment will dry up entirely. And yet, Ibrahim replied with a slight smile, in the 3 months since we renegotiated our mining contracts, our government revenues have increased by 400%. Foreign companies continue to profit, just not obscenely at our expense. He gestured toward the economic reports distributed earlier. What they call suicide, we call fair trade. Their threats of investment withdrawal were empty. There is too much wealth beneath our soil for corporations to abandon it entirely. The South African minister nodded thoughtfully. But the military threats remain. 3 of our colleagues have reported increased foreign military exercises near their borders since adopting similar resource policies. Which is why the defense cooperation agreement before us today is equally important, Ibrahim acknowledged. African solutions to African security challenges. As the discussion continued, Ibrahim's aide Issouf entered discreetly, placing a note before him. Ibrahim read it, then glanced toward the door where Captain Zungrana waited with a visitor, the former Interior Minister, thinner now, after months in detention awaiting trial. Ibrahim excused himself momentarily from the conference. 5 minutes, he told the guards accompanying the prisoner. They nodded and stepped back, maintaining a watchful distance. "You look well, Mr. President," the former minister said, his voice lacking its former arrogance. "The rumors are true. Then, 27 nations adopting your resource protocols?" "Not my protocols," Ibrahim corrected. "Our people's rightful demands. Why did you ask to see me? Your trial begins next week." The minister's eyes dropped to the floor. "To warn you, they haven't given up. New networks are forming, different players, same objectives." He hesitated before adding, "I've provided Captain Zungrana with everything I know, but there are operations even I wasn't privy to." Ibrahim studied the man who had once been willing to poison him for power. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I was wrong," the minister said simply. "What you're building here, it's what Africa has needed for generations, and it deserves a chance to succeed." After the minister was escorted out, Ibrahim returned to the conference room where debate had intensified over implementation timelines. As he took his seat, his gaze fell on a glass display case positioned prominently near the entrance, containing the sealed evidence bag with the poisoned glass that had nearly claimed his life. He had ordered it placed there as a reminder of vulnerability, of vigilance, and of how quickly power could shift. The assassination attempt that was meant to end a presidency had instead sparked a movement spreading across the continent. The Malian delegate was speaking passionately about uranium mining contracts. "They told us we should be grateful for receiving 10% of our own resources, 10% of wealth extracted from lands our ancestors have held for millennia." Ibrahim let his eyes move around the circular table. Economists, diplomats, defense ministers, all grappling with how to transform centuries of exploitation into true partnership. The path forward would not be smooth, but for the first time, it was a path of their own choosing. As evening fell, the delegates signed the preliminary agreement, a framework for collective resource negotiation that would fundamentally alter Africa's relationship with former colonial powers. When the last signature was affixed, a quiet sense of accomplishment filled the room. Later, as the palace emptied of visitors, Adjaratu, now Ibrahim's chief communications strategist, found him standing alone before the display case containing the poisoned glass. "The international press is calling it the African Resource Revolution," she said, handing him the latest news summaries. "Though Western outlets are still predicting economic collapse within a year," Ibrahim smiled slightly. "They've been predicting our failure since independence, yet here we stand. The Council of Elders has requested your presence in your home village this weekend, she continued. They say it's time for you to receive your ancestors' blessing for the path you've chosen. The mention of his village, of the grandmother who had raised him after his parents' death, of the dusty roads where he had first dreamed of a different future for his country, brought a rare softness to Ibrahim's expression. Tell them I will come, he said. Leadership disconnected from its roots withers quickly. As night settled fully over Ouagadougou, Ibrahim walked the palace grounds, nodding to the guards who maintained their vigilant watch. The weight of leadership had not lightened in the months since the assassination attempt. If anything, it had grown heavier with each new responsibility, each international pressure, each decision affecting millions of lives. But it was a weight shared now with others who had caught the same vision. What had begun as one man's stand against exploitation had evolved into a movement larger than any individual. In his office, Ibrahim found Captain Zungrana waiting with the daily security briefing. The intelligence reports confirm what the former minister said, the captain noted grimly. New networks forming, different tactics. The struggle continues. It always will, Ibrahim acknowledged. The empire never surrenders easily. He moved to the window, looking out over the capital where lights twinkled in the darkness, each one representing a home, a family, a piece of the nation he had sworn to serve. But neither do we, he added with quiet determination. On his desk sat a small clay pot, a gift from a market woman who had pressed it into his hands during a recent public appearance. For your water, Mr. President, she had said, so you need never drink from foreign vessels again. The simple gift embodied the transformation occurring across the country, a reclaiming of dignity, an assertion of identity, a determination to chart an independent course regardless of cost. The poison that had been meant to silence one voice had instead awakened millions. And in that awakening lay the true revolution, not just of resources or politics, but of possibility itself. Ibrahim touched the clay pot gently. The path ahead would demand continual vigilance against new threats, both external and internal. But tonight, in this moment of hard-won peace, he allowed himself to feel the significance of what had already been accomplished. The tables had turned, and this time they would not be turned back. Did this story touch your heart? Has something similar ever happened to you or someone you know? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you enjoyed this journey of transformation and discovery, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that reveal the truth about human connection, dignity, and the unexpected moments that change lives forever. Every like, comment, and share helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments.